Thanks for tuning in to this episode of I Have Something to Say, where subject matter experts are unafraid and unapologetic about sharing their perspectives regarding issues that impact our lives. They speak up because basically they give a shit. So if you're tired of canned answers and want to finally hear real people cut through the BS and talk about real issues, this is the podcast for you. I'm your host, Sami Heyman Marrero from Urbander, and behind our mixer is our producer, Chris Majoka from You Do You. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode, and I want to introduce our guest for today, Sophia Batson, and she is an international businesswoman. She is a creator, content creator, multiple businesses, entrepreneur, worked in the corporate sector. I mean, what kind of experience do you not have, Sophia?
That's a good question.
Professional, yeah, I mean, like a business guru, right? And really knows the inner workings of the fashion industry, and with that, you've created when we were talking, earlier last week, how you've created like this unicorn really in the fashion industry because it's a new publication, a publication that's been around for a little bit, Orchid Magazine, that really brings together the fashion world, right? The high-end fashion, but also with social consciousness and right equity and bringing it really with ethnic maturity and knowledge and a strong presence. And so first I want to applaud you for being so bold and creating this really unique platform, Orchid, that celebrates diversity, but not just superficially. Like your editorial pieces are really meaty, right? They're really filled with substance, and make you pause and think, about how we can really affect change in the world, and trying to bring not only just awareness, but also steps into making this happen, right? And not just staying at that superficial. It's not fluff. Let's just call it.
No,
Let's just
it
say what
isn't.
it's, right? It's not fluff at all. And so just tell us, how did you land here? Like your why? What's your why? What's your origin story? Like, how did you navigate, your trajectory and land where you're at right now with this offering?
Okay. All right. So, I'm international. So I was born in London, raised there, and in Jamaica. I lived 6 years in Italy. I went to university in the States, and I have had varied experiences up on top of that. But I started in the fashion industry probably over 20 years ago. I had difficulty progressing at a certain time when there was a financial crisis in New York, where I lived also for several years. I just had like a difficult time with work, and a difficult time with work also in London. And as for somebody as educated, eloquent, and experienced as I am, and still humble, I should not have had such a difficult time. Okay,
Right.
And I'm not ashamed to say that the lack of work and other things, despite being incredibly talented, even led to me being homeless and so forth. So I've had lots of varied experiences. So it was because I was like forced into it. I noticed a long time ago in the fashion industry, shooting as a stylist, that it was, and I was always trying to like lead people in the path, but not like with force, but to try to get them to shoot more ethnic models, not just black or everything else. And it was always like a difficult task. Okay.
Yeah.
And in fact, I'd say like just over 10 years ago, or even 10 years ago, finding like a dark skinned black model, not just like, not like myself, like I mean dark. Okay. That was like a difficult task. So now, okay, well, I see that the models have become more diverse, but yet at the same time, we still have only one major fashion house with a black creative director. So
Yeah.
that's that's it in a nutshell.
Yeah. So it's like behind the scenes, it's just really understanding that it's at every level, right? That there has to
It's
be this
mhm.
perspective and this lens because we are becoming a more diverse community here in the US. And then also internationally too. But we're
Right.
based out of the US. So, and I feel that there's a, how do you say now, like an awakening or some kind of a movement going on in terms of a collective consciousness, in terms of not only just embracing diversity and being more inclusive, but really finding ways to have more equitable access to um, opportunities and to the resources that our communities need to thrive in, right? Or to thrive, right? And so I know that
Exactly.
there's some categories, like for example sports, and we'll get into that in a minute, because when before we hopped on this recording, you told me
Right.
about what happened yesterday. I totally missed it. I'm like baffled. But this is the problem, right? That it's almost like diversity is accepted when it benefits, right? When it benefits people, but the equity part and the inclusion part is the hard part, because there's no equal treatment when when
Mm-mm.
when the shit hits the fan, right? Or when things go sour, or when it doesn't benefit me, or if you don't see any, and so that's where I think there's a lot of work still to be done. And it's frustrating. It's frustrating. And I just want to know, share with us, what happened, yesterday, that you just filled me in on. I'm like, I'm still like baffled by the whole thing, and pissed off, to be quite honest with you, because it's like, how does this even happen, right? And then where's it going to lead? Like, are people even going to get reprimanded? Like, and what kind of penalty? Anyway, whatever. So yesterday there was a soccer game, or European football,
Yeah, there is
right?
it's a European championship. Okay, so
Right.
and then for me to even get to explaining what happened yesterday, there's some background, right? So
Yeah.
I'm British. I'm of okay, whatever ethnicity ethnicity I am, black. Okay, and so for many of us, okay, my ancestry and so forth is very complicated. I've lived in different parts. So, but for people that were actually born in the UK, okay, and both of if their parents are from somewhere else or they're mixed race or whatever, the ones that don't have a connection to their parents' families, meaning countries, for many people, you're not considered British unless you are white. Okay.
Mm.
So, regardless of where you were born or whatever, okay. And then that happened with one of them who provided them with a good number of goals that got them to the final. He was born in Jamaica, raised in the UK from he was 5 years up. Right. Now let's get to yesterday. So, yesterday, unfortunately, okay, so first of all, it's been 55 years since before I was born that England even ended up in a final, all right, a final. And it was a bit of a surprise to all of us, all right, a great surprise. So perhaps the purpose for it, okay, from the man up above, if that's what you believe in,
Mm.
then is that it's a teaching moment for everybody,
Yes.
right?
Mhm.
So you arrive at the final, and it ends up in these dastardly penalty kicks, which I always am disgusted with and disagree with. So I just leave the pub at that point because I can't be bothered anymore. And so it ends up to penalty kicks. So three guys missed the penalty kicks, all right?
Mhm.
One, Marcus Rashford, 23 years old. Saka, I believe he's 19 years old. Barely a man, okay? Perhaps that's insulting to him, but please excuse me. I don't mean any disrespect by
Is that
that. And
he's
then the
young?
other one,
Just to
and
young?
yeah, and then the other one about 20 years old. And they're up there and have performed, at the top of their game. And then Marcus Rashford, 23 years old, he raised £200 million during the pandemic for children to eat, and have school parcels delivered to their home, because we know lots of children, don't get to eat unless they go to school, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Even in America too. And you should see what the government had come up with. Their proposition for school parcels was absolutely dastardly. Okay, disgusting. Right. So now let's get to the point. So the point is that after this all happened, you should see the tirade of insults that was unleashed, okay, upon these three players, okay, and mainly this start of abuse mainly starts on Twitter and then continues a little bit onto Instagram, but it really starts on Twitter, okay, called prime. Okay, now I'm being diplomatic, which I always am. Called
Mm.
primates. One of them called with an explosive or expletive beginning with an F and then called slaves after that.
Mm.
And just things and racial insults of this
Slurs,
nature.
yes. Uh-huh.
Yeah, just more than like abuse and just unleashed and unloaded upon them.
Yeah, on these young men. And so and that's where, right, it comes to the surface. And so what's the antidote against this? What's the antidote against this? And I know that there's all of these channels, like you just mentioned, Twitter and Instagram and all of this stuff. And I know you're a creator, right? You have this new, you have this platform, the Orchid publication, that I know you created to fill in a void, right? It's
Right,
that lack of that voice of diversity
right.
within the fashion industry that we all know very well. I come from publishing too. That's something that we have in common, right? um but then now this is at a world scale, that it's out there in, and
Right.
we know it's going to get the coverage, of the regular media outlets, and because they feed off this type of situation to really,
Mm-hmm.
get audiences and all of that. But what is the remedy? What, in your view, you created this new platform in publishing, it's online, to fill in a void. What do you see as a possible remedy to counter this behavior, and to help these young guys, really, that they just want to, do their craft, their art, and and do good because they're philanthropists too, right? And then get attacked in this vicious way. It's like the true colors, right, of their fans are coming out.
Exactly.
What
It's the true
hypocrites!
colors. Okay, but these people are people that we rub elbows with, and some of them we probably even call them our friends or co-workers or so forth. And this
Or
is what comes out
followers.
of
Yeah.
their mouth. Okay, so what is it exactly that you think of me or that you say about me behind your back? So it is, like I said, it is a real teaching moment and an eye awareness for people who walk around in in the UK, all right, and think, oh, we're in a post-racial society. Well,
Mhm.
that
Yeah.
is absolute bollocks. That's what
Yeah.
I have to say to that. All right. As far as how you go forward from that, well, it starts in the youth and it starts in the teenagers. All right. And
Mhm.
while they might, you know, unleash a tirade of insults, had those players been white, it would not have been anything of this nature.
Yeah.
Anything of this nature.
Right. No, absolutely. So yeah, I think I've been talking to a lot of, younger people. I have, nieces and nephews, in that age group. And really, when you sit down to talk to them, there's a lot of maturity, really. I think they're in disgust too. You could see them, and a lot of them that even grow up in households that tend to be, of this type of thinking, right? You could see that they're, I think that they're friends, and they've grown up in an environment where they have access and more control to learning about the world. Back when we were kids, we didn't have access to, like, the internet and YouTube and all of these other things. And I see them that they're so much more aware and also educated, really, about world cultures, that they don't have these, like, the judgment and the prejudices, and these, I mean, I'm not saying we all have biases, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, but it's not that hate, it's not that ugly beast, right?
Right.
That's lurking under the surface, and there you're like, wait a second, I didn't know this about you, right? And so yeah, I think you're right that that's going to be the answer. And obviously more people being bold enough to create new things that just counter, since we can't dismantle that and we can't break it down, and so then let's just create something new. I think that's what you did with your publication too, right? It's like you were
Yes,
finding
exactly.
an alternative to all of the fluff that's out there, to all of the
Exactly.
yeah. And so how do you go about um finding the things that you want to focus on when you're doing not only the fashion, photo shoots and recruiting or finding the talent, from the photographers and creators and makeup artists and fashion designers and, the model, everybody, because I know that's what you're trying to do, right? Is to really
Exactly.
demonstrate there's talent out there. It's not so hard
Exactly.
to
It
find,
isn't.
yeah. So how do you bring those teams together, and what's your vision, in terms of impact with your publication? Are topics like this one that we just briefly discussed part of that voice that you're trying to provide? Like what is it? What is it exactly that you're looking to accomplish? Because I know that it's new, right? It's a new way
Right.
of viewing publishing.
Right. I mean, so it's a combination, not just of the fluff. I mean, the fluff is like the pretty models and the pretty pictures with the, pretty clothing, but the point of the content is that it's very mixed, okay? And then
Yeah.
beyond that is not just the point of the content, but the teams that create the content are also very mixed. The
Yeah.
interns that work on the publication are also very mixed. The designers are also very mixed, and yet at the same time, it does not uh, ignore and or exclude what we still politely refer to as the industry standard. Okay,
Right. Uh-huh.
all right. So that's back to the Trojan horse or the unicorn or whatever we were talking about previously. Um, so as far as what I pick, sometimes to be honest with you, if I'm looking to post or feature like a black designer or a black shoe designer or an Asian one or whatever, sometimes to be honest with you, to find them, it's not very easy. Okay. The
Mm.
crews to shoot with the people, the crews, okay, photographer, makeup artist, and so forth, that's rather easy for me. But the content is not necessarily. And then as far as the
Mm.
last portion of the magazine, which we call politica, meaning particular issues which are of interest or affect people of color disparately, okay,
Yeah.
then obviously there are enough issues out there that we can talk about and expound on, all day.
Yes, totally. And so would something like what just happened be something that you would cover?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
With, of course, the lens of your experience also, having lived in so
Exactly.
many countries and knowing exactly, it's like you could smell BS from a mile away, I bet. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, that's great. So yeah, it's what do you feel then, and that's really interesting, and I'm kind of not, I shouldn't be surprised, right? That that in terms of the fashion designers themselves, that
Hmm.
because that's like, in the fashion industry, that's what's most visible. What they create and they produce, and having access to the manufacturing aspect and the pattern makers and all of that machine that you need to have access to those resources to be able to in effect penetrate the high-end fashion industry. It doesn't surprise me because there are barriers to access. What would you say are the barriers that you've seen in
Ah,
your experience
okay.
within the fashion industry themselves, itself? I'm sure that there are a lot of
Hmm.
similarities with corporate America, but I'm sure that there are like stories that you have that you could probably, share to demonstrate, right? How inequitable the
Okay.
access is and how
So the
cutthroat and yeah, and just
yeah.
blatantly closed it is for people of color to get into the fashion industry at that level.
Okay, so let me write down two of them because I just want to make sure that I cover these two most important things. Right. So the first one is money. Okay. So the
Mm,
internships. Okay. If your parents have like suffered or whatever, or the internships already basically, as opposed to corporate America or banking, most of them are like unpaid. Right. So you have to
mm,
be able to like sit there and invest in that and do that. Okay. And if you don't have that money yourself or your parents don't have that money, then you're not able to, and then you're not able to proceed. And even if you do have that money from your parents or somebody, even after that it's extremely difficult to proceed. The same thing with the photographers. All right, you have to be able to put out money for shoot to create your portfolio to even go after jobs. You have to be able to put out money to shoot, to have a studio, to pay for the camera, to pay for lunch for your teams, etc., etc., etc. Now, so let's say that you do, you know, do one of these internships, then moving upward and upward mobility is just extremely difficult. It's like the most. I think fashion, I don't, not that I think it is. Fashion is the clickiest is one of the clickiest industries
industries.
that there are out there. Okay,
Mhm.
so I had a conversation. Let's see, probably about 2 months ago, with a designer who had sent me some. Let's just say it's safe to say a bag, um, and then I was going to like set up a meeting with her on the phone and so forth. And then I was just curious as to why there was no real like her bio. She decided not to have a picture along with her bio on her site. And then as soon as I got on the phone with her, then I realized why. Okay, because not everybody that you get on the phone with you can tell is black. Okay, and not
Right.
but this particular person, and I could definitely tell she was a black American. And so, I touched on that with her, and I had to tell her I'm sorry that she had to feel that way. Well, basically, that
Yeah.
now I had her on the phone, then I could understand why they're. No, yeah, I think that's what the point that I made. Now that I had her on the phone, that
Yeah.
I could understand exactly why there was no figure with her, no photo with her bio. Okay.
Yeah.
So that
Yeah.
was a discussion. And then another gentleman, beautiful jewelry line, costume. He's Moroccan, beautiful looking brown skinned man, but his picture was on his site, but like very hidden. And I touched on that with him, and then he said yes, he had to form his own company because in the fashion industry he just wasn't able to move along.
Mm. You see? Yeah. It really is, it's really disappointing. And yeah, it's really disappointing to hear anecdotes, right? That confirm what you already know, but I can see how it's much more difficult in the fashion industry, although it's the same, but in a lot of industries, but I could see how it could be very clicky because there's like
Uh-huh.
specific events that happen, right? And all of that.
Right.
But it happens, I mean, it happens a lot. It's so funny because when I was pregnant with my son Pedro, I had this, my husband is originally from New York, from the Bronx. He grew up in the Bronx in a Latino family. And his father was very indigenous looking, but my husband, came out fair skin, right? And so, make a long story short, when I grew up in Puerto Rico, so it wasn't until I came to the US that obviously I was exposed to this, like, really, I mean, like, the racial divide and cultural, it's like ethnicities and all of this stuff, right? And so, because we have it in Puerto Rico too, don't get me wrong, colorism and all of that, right? The
Mhm.
thing is, everyone's in denial over there, but that's a whole other show, right? They're like, I know we're not racist. No, yes, let's just be real. It exists, but that's a whole other program, right? A whole other episode. But where I was getting at is that my husband, with the PTSD of growing up in the Bronx and and living in a really predominantly white neighborhood, and
Right.
feeling like, "Phew, I can pass, so no one will beat me up," So people thought he was just another Italian American guy or kid, right? And he didn't challenge them on that, right? He's like, "Oh, yeah, I'll just try to blend in so they won't kick my ass," right? Basically, he's like, when you grow up in the Bronx, you try to just avoid getting into trouble at that point. And so I got that, but I didn't understand that, right? Because in Puerto Rico, everyone's Puerto Rican. So when we were pregnant with our firstborn, oh my gosh, Sophia, it was like World War III just to pick the name of this kid, because my husband was of the thinking, and I get it because, again, growing up the way he did, that it had to be a name, like, and I refused to. I was like, I want to name him, like a name that I can pronounce in Spanish, right? And so it was a war. And so, but anyway, we landed on Pedro, which is his father's name, and Samuel, which is my father's name, and then that was it. That was the end of it. And of course, obviously, as time went by, then we have Obama, right?
Hmm.
Winning. And I'm like, well, look at his name, right? And he's the freaking president. I'm like, you see, so it's slowly but surely, right? These barriers are we're stripping them down, but it's still very present. And to hear, that this happened, just with this game, and this just it's just evil. But knowing the challenges that people in the fashion industry have to make it, right, to reach,
Yeah,
sometimes I think that creating these unique outlets where then you can have these creators featured and have a voice, and sometimes we create these things, and I speak for myself too, that that are designed to negate or to counter what's already established. And it might take a few more years to get it done, but it's done with gusto, it's done with integrity, it's done to really celebrate everyone, because it doesn't come from a place of even wanting to. We don't want to attack the oppressor either, right? We just want to make
right.
sure that we get a chance too to strut our stuff
Exactly.
and to be able to showcase all of the unhidden talents that are in the communities, that don't have a fair shot at strutting.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
Lots
yeah.
of people of color, they just, especially in the fashion industry, don't even have a chance. It's like you're completely like disregarded or not even given a chance. Or if you do show up, then it's just a bit of a shock to them. It's just far more difficult. It's a difficult industry regardless, as
Right.
all of us who work in it know, but it's definitely extremely more difficult for us people of color, especially black. But I can only speak as a black woman, so I can't
Yeah.
really speak about anybody else
Yeah,
except
but
what
it
I
happens.
see for non-ethnic people.
Yeah. 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 And but I think it's across the board. I mean, I used to work in publishing, and I experienced the same thing. Especially it was really weird because my maiden name is Sammy Heyman, right? And so
Mm.
that, but when you see it in writing, it was funny because I would show up to meetings, and they were expecting like a Jewish guy,
Jewish
right?
spirit. That's what I would have
Then I
said.
show up,
Yes.
and it was like, what the hell just happened, right? And so I loved it. I was really amused by it. And I used to get into trouble because I always tried to show up in my full power, even though they tried to stifle, my voice and stuff. I got into a lot of trouble. But anyway, but it's the same thing with publishing, right? It's a lot of, really, there's not a lot of diversity in
Nope.
the publishing industry. Nope. And so it's really difficult to break through. I'm glad I'm not in it anymore. It's been a hot 13 years already, so I'm glad it's over. But in any event, I'm just still amused though, because you see, in the case of Hispanic media and Hispanic publishing, for example, I just see that a lot of the big agencies, the big Latino, agencies that are across the country, that I used to visit all the time, were so hung up on just doing the Spanish only thing that they kind of isolated themselves, right?
Ah,
From the rest of the media industry. And not only that, that they perpetuated the stereotypes because they do like all the programming and all of the, on the Spanish language media. It's really about, the telenovelas where is the handsome, light skinned Latino guy, right? And
yeah.
then and then the evil, light skinned, rich woman that's his like, girlfriend. And then here comes the maid, right? Who's more
Mhm.
indigenous looking,
With
and
curly
see
hair.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. So it's like they really promoted that. And I think that really a lot of the business owners of those days that are still around. Now they're all just bitching about why all of the dollars to multicultural and diversity are going to black agencies or black creators after
Mm,
the murder of George Floyd, that there's been this like movement from the corporate sector to really support, right, more equitable resources and funding in
right.
some areas, right? And so I hear them like complaining about it, but it's like, dude, you've spent the last 30 years, trying to make it big and rub shoulders, with white America. And because you're light skinned, you tried to pass, right? And to fit that picture. And so then now all of a sudden you're brown. Now you're realizing, wait a second. I'm oh wait, you know, I'm brown too. I wanna
Right.
get some, I wanna get some. Well, no papi, no mommy, no papito, no mamita. No, that's not how it works. It's like when was the last time you did some grassroots initiatives or really did, as the owner of a big media agency, right?
Right.
Like grassroots. I swear, I worked in that industry for 12 years and never was I invited to go to some kind of grassroots community, event to really support. No, it was always galas and shishi and stuff like that. It's and no real connection to your roots and to the people that are really disenfranchised and that need you to be there for them to lift us all up, And so anyway, I just find a lot of hypocrisy going on also in a lot of these spaces, and I just, at this point counter when I can, when I can
Right.
chime in, yeah, or just roll my eyes and take a deep breath. I sigh. and then I meet
Exactly.
and then I meet people like you, and I'm like, okay,
Right.
she's doing the thing. And she's actually creating something completely different, completely new, and it's a breath of fresh air. It's a breath of fresh air because that's what I love to do. Just find like-minded people are just saying, you know what? Later for you, I'm going to do my thing because it has to be completely different and we need to shift this thing, and then that's it. And then just try to, keep on moving it along and moving the needle, and it feels so good, right? When you're able
Exactly.
to move
Exactly.
it just a little bit further, right?
Right.
What's your vision for Orchid? And why Orchid? Why did you call it Orchid too? Orchid magazine.
That's a good question. There were a slew of names, but that happened to be the domain that was available.
Ah, really?
Isn't
Okay.
that funny? So there was,
Yes.
there was like a list of names, right? So which one shall we pick? So,
Yeah.
this one wasn't available, next one wasn't available. So, it wasn't the only one that was available, but that was a huge, deciding factor. So orchid,
Yeah.
that means like a flower that's beautiful flower that blooms. Mm,
Yes, but it's also one that needs to be cared for and
exactly.
nurtured, right? And
Yes.
that grows, kind of it grows like in an interesting way too, because it's not really
Yeah,
soil, right? It's not, it's like, yeah, they're kind of unique that way. So you know what, I think you landed on the right name, like you,
exactly.
I'm sure you'll figure out, some kind of, rationale behind or how to tie it, weave it into, your storytelling, regarding
But
the publication. Yeah.
I'm definitely the one to do like something of this globally. There are other
Yeah.
people, but like, for what I've seen and experienced as far as whatever, you know,
Yeah.
lack of work or,
Yeah.
and globally, then I'm
Yeah.
definitely the sort of person to take this on.
Yeah. And so so what is that vision that you have for the publication moving forward?
So now at this point to just, continue on with the exposure of in globally,
Mhm.
diverse designers and models and teams, and then um, discuss political things, meaning that
Yeah.
ones that affect us people of color, you know,
Yeah.
more
Yeah.
with disparity, things of
Yes.
that nature. And then other things will branch off from there. But as far as the magazine does and finishing off the development of it, which is taking place now, then that's that.
That's fantastic. I mean, fashion and the way we dress is really an art form, and I
Mm.
think that it largely communicates the feeling of a certain time. And so I think that you're really onto something. I'm excited to see where you take this. And you know that, you're welcome to share anything that
Absolutely,
develops with the publication as you move forward. Wouldn't it be
absolutely,
cool to have, maybe that's what we could do. And we'll talk to Chris about it, our producer. Wouldn't it be cool to have occasionally some of these designers on
absolutely,
the podcast? Is like, I have something to say, you're welcome to
absolutely.
use our platform. I'm
Okay
serious,
then.
Sophia,
All right.
and then invite them, and then that's it. You take over those episodes and just interview, and have these conversations, with
Right.
these artists and creators and designers to really get to know them, because I think exposure is the number one key. There's so much talent, and I think that the more youth that identify as people of color see people like us speaking and out there, and supporting each other and weighing in and advancing and creating, and not being afraid. I think then the more we'll see that more people will say, yeah, and if she could do that, I can do that too. Right. And
Right.
so
Exactly.
I think
And
that
that's
the
what's needed. So,
yes, yeah, totally. So we're gonna definitely do this again. Okay. Yeah.
absolutely.
I'm
Okay
really,
then.
I'm really excited to learn more about what you're doing and where you're going. And
Mhm.
I think you're definitely onto something
Oh
really
no,
cool.
I know I am because of
Oh, no.
because all of that hardship and those experiences that I had, which are unnecessary, as I've said, for somebody with my talent and experience, were
Yes,
definitely for a purpose and to put me on a track to this.
absolutely. Great. Good, good. I'm so excited. Thank you so much for coming
Mhm.
on today and
Thank
sharing
you.
all of your plans with us. And you have a cheerleader right here, right? And so,
Absolutely.
and
Thank
so
you.
yes, and we'll be talking more, okay?
All righty then.
Okay. Thank you so
Okay.
much, Sophia. Okay,
All
take
right.
care.
Bye.
Bye-bye. This concludes this episode of I Have Something to Say. We want to thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to tell your friends about us. We're on Spotify and iTunes as well. There's more to come next week. And remember, if you have something to say, it's time to speak up.